If you've ever been wronged and wanted revenge, my story might resonate with you. Am I the asshole for blowing up my ex's life by reporting him for cheating on his taxes after he cheated on me? Hi everyone, I'm Emily, 28 years old, and I guess you could say I've been through the emotional ringer lately. For context, I was in a relationship with Dan, 32 years old, for about 3 years. We met through mutual friends, and everything felt like it clicked from the start. Dan was charming, successful, and had this way of making me feel like I was the most important person in the world, or so I thought. Dan works as a financial advisor. He's good at what he does, really good actually. He's the kind of guy who's always talking about investments, tax strategies, and how to make the most out of every dollar. I admired his drive and ambition, and I was proud of him for building such a successful career. But looking back, I think I was blinded by all of that. I didn't see the red flags, or maybe I didn't want to see them. About 6 months ago, I found out that Dan was cheating on me. It wasn't some dramatic reveal. I didn't catch him in the act or find incriminating texts. No, it was more subtle and painful. Dan started pulling away from me, canceling plans last minute and making excuses for why he couldn't spend time together. He became more secretive with his phone, which had never been an issue before. I felt like I was losing him, but whenever I tried to talk about it, he'd brush me off or make me feel like I was being paranoid. One night, he came home late from work again, smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. My heart sank, and I couldn't hold back anymore. I confronted him, and after some back and forth, he finally admitted it. He'd been seeing someone else for a few months, a client of all people. He tried to justify it by saying that we'd grown distant and that it just happened. He even had the nerve to suggest that we could work things out and move past it. But I was done, completely and utterly done. I packed a bag and left that night, moving in with a friend while I figured out my next steps. The betrayal was so deep that I couldn't even begin to process it. I had loved this man, supported him and trusted him, and he threw it all away for some fling with a client. I was devastated, but I was also furious. That anger grew inside me, and I knew I couldn't just let him get away with it. Now, here's where the story takes a turn. While we were together, Dan would sometimes brag about how clever he was when it came to handling his taxes. He'd say things like, "You have to know how to play the system, Emily. It's all about knowing the loopholes." I didn't think much of it at the time. He worked in finance after all, so I figured he knew what he was doing. But now, in my anger and hurt, those conversations came back to me. I started to piece together all the little things he'd mentioned over the years, how he'd underreport his income, claim deductions for things that were clearly personal expenses, and move money around in ways that didn't quite add up. He always made it sound like it was no big deal, just part of being smart with his money. But now, I saw it for what it really was. Cheating, plain and simple. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't just let this go. Dan had not only betrayed me, but was also blatantly breaking the law. And for what? To save a few bucks? I felt like he deserved to face the consequences of his actions, not just for cheating on me, but for cheating the system too. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I reported him to the IRS. I gathered up every piece of information I could remember, conversations we'd had, things he'd said, even some old financial documents I still had lying around, and submitted an anonymous tip. I knew it was extreme, but in that moment, I felt like it was the only way to get some semblance of justice. It didn't take long for things to unravel for Dan. A few weeks after I made the report, he got a notice that he was being audited. His whole world started to fall apart. He was slapped with fines, penalties, and back taxes that he couldn't easily pay off. Word got out in his professional circle, and he started losing clients. His reputation, which he had worked so hard to build, was crumbling before his eyes. Dan reached out to me, desperate and angry, demanding to know if I had anything to do with it. I played dumb, acting as if I had no idea what he was talking about. He was suspicious, but he couldn't prove anything. I thought I'd feel vindicated, maybe even a little satisfied, but instead I felt conflicted. I knew what I'd done was harsh, and I didn't regret standing up for myself. But as I watched his life fall apart, I started to question whether I'd gone too far. Yes, he'd hurt me deeply, but had I taken it to a level that was unnecessary? Dan wasn't just losing money, he was losing his career, his reputation, and possibly his future. I had made sure of that. Friends I've confided in have had mixed reactions. Some think he got what he deserved, that he needed to learn a lesson the hard way. Others think I crossed a line, that I should have just walked away and left him to deal with his own karma. And honestly, I'm not sure how I feel anymore. Part of me is still angry, still hurt by the betrayal. But another part of me wonders if I let my emotions get the better of me. Maybe I should have just let him go and moved on with my life. After all, revenge doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't erase the pain. It just adds more chaos to an already painful situation. So, am I the asshole for blowing up my ex's life by reporting him for cheating on his taxes after he cheated on me? Did I take things too far? Or was I justified in making sure he faced the consequences of his actions? I can't change what I've done, but I can't shake the feeling that I might have crossed a line. What do you think?